All right, let's go to chapter 1 now. Let's say that you have, scanned that chapter and you've written some notes down. I'm going to kind of illustrate some of the main points as I go through this kind of skeleton lecture on chapter 1. And so if you see concepts that are presented in the PowerPoints and I talk about, you probably want to pay attention to those concepts in your book readings, okay? And so really what I'm doing is illustrating the main points from each chapter when I give these lectures, okay? So that's the way your lectures are kind of constructed, so that you pull out the main information and you'll be prepared for quizzes, okay? All right, it says, social psychology has to do with the influence others have on us. All right, so social influence is very important when you think about what social psychology studies, okay? And social influence can be either real, where another person or a group of people are around us, right, influencing what we do, how we behave and think, right? That's called real presence. And then it could be even that I could be influenced if I just imagine in my head that another person or group members are around me while I'm doing something, okay? And now just right now, in this moment, I am being influenced by thinking about you, all right? The whole class. How should I act in this setting to connect with your learning at home, right? Many of you are watching this lecture at various times, right? Could be daytime, could be middle of the night, could be you woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're watching this, okay? And so I'm thinking about all of you, and I'm being influenced in my behaviors and thinking patterns by the class, okay? So that's the imagined presence. And it's interesting, teaching online or teaching during a pandemic when no one is in a classroom like this one, it's very different for me. I'm being influenced very differently, okay? All right, the formal definition of social psychology from Gordon Allport in 1985, is the scientific study of the way in which people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are influenced by the real or imagined presence of other people. Okay, so this real presence and imagined presence is very important in terms of social influence. Okay, and social psychology, the definition, is embedded with that concept of social influence. All right, so we have the words influence and influential. We can be influenced in numerous ways, okay, by the people we are around or their imagined presence, okay? What would my father say if I was doing something? All right, I could be influenced just by thinking about what Dad would say, right? My father passed away when I was a kid, but I can still picture him in my mind, and he kind of influences my behavior even as an adult today, okay? In the way he acted, in the way he thought. What would my brothers say? All right, I have 2 brothers, and they're still alive, and they do influence me in ways that are interesting. What does my teacher say? I have no teacher right now, but you guys do. Are you influenced by your professors? All of these sources might change and influence our thinking, okay? So that's influence, social influence. When we say people are influential in our lives, we might think about role models or authority figures that we look up to, right? And they influence us to even set goals, right? For the way we want to be, okay? So we can say that people are influential in our lives. Okay. Science guides social psychology, okay? Common sense sayings and folk kinds of wisdom are not scientific, are they? All right, some people might say in this third bullet point on this slide that opposites attract, okay? But other people might say that birds of a feather flock together. Do you understand what that means? Well, maybe in relationships, you are attracted to somebody who's completely opposite from what you are, okay? And it could be in their attitudes, it could be in their looks, it could be political views, it could be anything, right? And that's the way some people get attracted to one another, right? Others think that people who are very similar to us are attractive, okay? And so these kinds of people get attracted to people who are just like them, okay, or pretty much like them. They have the same values and beliefs and other things, qualities, right? So science guides what social psychologists study, okay, and the way they study it. In the first bullet point, it says social psychologists take into account conditions that might differentially affect behavior, okay? So conditions, what does that mean? This comes from Kurt Levin's view that a person behaves in relation to social context. So we have these words conditions, we have this word context. What does that say to you, you know? What is a context? Well, if you think about it, it's maybe an environment that you're in, right? That word environment. We like to use the word context in psychology to talk about environmental influences, okay? If you think about context, it might be a school context like this. It might be a home context like you're in now. It might be a prison, right, where some people are locked away. That's a context. Could be a hospital where somebody is very ill. That's a context. And we have all these different contexts within which we operate. Well, maybe not prison, right? But there are many different environments that we go into, and that might affect the way we behave, right? All right, as your book says, opposites attract and birds of a feather flock together. How would we know which is correct? Each, it seems, is right under certain circumstances if we use a scientific approach to study those hypotheses. Okay, what's a hypothesis? It's a specific statement of prediction. I predict that opposites will attract. Okay, I predict that people who are similar will be attracted to similar people. Okay, or I don't know, that's badly worded, but you understand what I'm saying, right? Okay, as I give these web links, make sure that you click on those and read, okay? Because as I'm giving these lectures, I'm not really clicking on these, but at home, when you review the lectures, make sure you click on these reading links to pick up extra information about these, okay? Because you might not know who Kurt Levin was, okay? He was thought of as one of the founders of social psychology, okay? So social psychology is a relatively new branch of psychology, born in the 1920s, okay? All right, last bullet point here. It says social psychologists don't just believe that people are individually different, due to their personality traits or due to genetic differences. Okay? We don't just behave the way we do because as individuals we have different personalities or different genetic makeups, right? But behavior in social psychology terms can be better explained by taking into account social influences on behavior, which is in some cases very powerful. All right? And I've inserted a link right here about Jim Jones' cult, where 900 people died by drinking Kool-Aid laced with some poison, okay? You know the term drinking the Kool-Aid, where that comes from? It comes from that particular event in history, in American history, okay? Drinking the Kool-Aid comes from the Jonestown mass suicide, okay? It's interesting. Okay, so for more information on this powerful example of social influence, you can click on this Time article on the Jonestown massacre. All right, this is another concept in your chapter 1 that you'll need to write about and understand what it means, okay? Construals, that's the way you pronounce it. What is a construal, okay? People perceive, interpret, and comprehend stimuli or situations we confront. That is called a construal, okay? So let's see. I perceive it, so I'm bringing in some either visual information or hearing information or anything through my senses, right? And then whatever I bring in, I interpret that in my mind. And to comprehend it, I think about it and try to understand it, right? That's comprehension, isn't it? All right, so we're bringing in information, we're interpreting it in our minds, and we're understanding it, whatever it may be. It could be just a stimulus, like, I don't know, we drive by a bank and we see a bank robbery, right? That's a stimulus, isn't it? Or a situation, maybe we go to a rock concert or something like that, and we watch everybody and what they're doing. That's a situation, okay? And we construe information based on what we have perceived and interpreted and comprehended. Social psychologists' levels of analysis, that's another important point, according to the textbook, is the individual in the context of a social situation, okay? And their construals of the situation. All right, so level of analysis is usually one person in the context of social others, okay, in a situation, which means a context, and how they construe those events, all right? So that's the way they analyze people. If you think about clinical psychologists or cognitive psychologists or personality psychologists, their level of analysis is just the individual without taking into regard any situation. So that's different from the way social psychologists look at people, right? It's interesting. I'm all alone in this classroom, right? But I am still being influenced by the imagined presence of you, right? And so, you know, it's a good way to think. I'm an individual in the context of a social situation. Although there are no people in this class, I am still being influenced by people who are not here, okay? And so what are my construals of the situation? You understand what a construal is now? All right. If you take sociology classes, they don't look at individuals in social context. They look at groups or societies, right? And how they construe what's going on sometimes, okay? So, you know, if you were to take a social psychology class from a sociologist, it would be a different kind of perspective than looking at an individual in a social context, right? All right, look in the textbook and see what other ideas besides levels of analysis distinguishes social psychology, because there is at least one more, and how social psychology is related to other subdisciplines or disciplines. There's a nice little chart in the book that shows you these things, okay? All right, we're going to go over this concept later, but it is mentioned in your chapter 1, and so I'll kind of describe it in general terms today. The fundamental attribution error, okay? We always wonder what causes other people to do the things that they do, all right? What is their motivation? What is the cause of why people do certain things, okay? Your boyfriend gets really jealous and gets angry at you, right? And accuses you of infidelity, right? What is the cause of that behavior? You might think, well, it's probably his personality, or maybe it's his upbringing, right, that made him feel so jealous that he accused you of infidelity. Stay away from those people, right? But it could be, if you were thinking about it in another way, it could be that he's had other social situations that have brought him to feel like he could be abandoned or something, right, by other loved ones. So, I don't know. Is that some kind of an environmental or contextual, causal attribution that we make? Could it be that the environment made him this way, and so that's why he's very jealous and he accuses you of being unfaithful or cheating? Or is it some internal kind of a thing that causes him to be this way, okay? Is he abnormal in some way, right? Very suspicious. Okay. So we make these kinds of attributions about other people, even very close people, all the time, okay? And we often make mistakes about the causes of behavior just because we don't think in dualistic terms usually. We think about, just single causes of why people do the things they do. All right, so if we think, if we see somebody else that succeeds, let's say that there's a stranger in class that makes 110 on a test, right, and you make 50, right? What do you say about the cause of that kid who's made 110 on the test? All right, do you think that maybe he's smart? Or do you think that maybe he got lucky based on conditions on the test, right? Maybe the professor had put simple questions on the test or had helped that student study, right? So those are environmental kinds of causes that might make that student succeed while you failed, right? Okay. Also, if another person fails, let's say that there's someone in class who continually gets F's on their quizzes or their tests, right? Well, would you say that person is just innately lazy, or they innately don't study, they're stupid or something, right? We do this every day. We think about the causes of why people do certain things, like failing or succeeding. Okay, but what happens? Is it different? Do we think differently about the causes when it's ourselves? Okay, so if it's me, if I get that 110 on a test, what do I attribute the cause of that to? Well, usually that's going to be an internal kind of a thing, right? I am smart. I am intelligent. I am this and that, right? And it's all kind of an internal attribution if I succeed. But, think about this. If I fail, it's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault. It's the environment's fault, right? So, these are all attribution errors that we make, okay? And it's called a fundamental attribution error. We'll talk more about this later in class, but we make mistakes about the causes of behavior because we might not know much about situations surrounding other people, right? While we know our own situation, okay? All right, there are two motives that kind of drive social behavior, and you can read about these in Chapter 1. We have the need to feel good about ourselves, okay? So you've often heard other people talk about this term that's here on this slide called self-esteem, okay? I don't know about this term, I was trained to be a cognitive psychologist, and so I'm often kind of skeptical about terms that are really unclear and hard to measure, okay? Is the term self-esteem something we can actually measure? And then how would we measure it, okay, in total? How would we measure self-esteem? Social psychologists have done it, though, right? So we need to feel good about ourselves, and so that's one primary motive in life for social psychologists to study. The second motive is we need to be accurate about things, okay? Including the way we perceive and interpret and understand other people. That's called social cognition, right? That's construals of social others. All right, so feeling good about oneself and the need to be accurate, those are two primary motives for people, according to the textbook. All right, this particular part of the book is very important for the quiz. Why study social psychology? Well, you've kind of gotten an inkling from the things that I've been talking about in this lecture that others really influence the way we behave, sometimes in very powerful ways, as I said earlier, right? It says we define social psychology as a scientific study of social influence, but why do we want to understand social influence in the first place? What difference does it make whether our behavior has its roots in the desire to be accurate or to bolster our self-esteem? Okay, those are those two motives I just talked about. And the basic answer is we're curious, okay? And so you can read the rest of this and kind of get an idea about how it all kind of ties together when you read this part about why study social psychology. I'm going to say before we go away that there have been lots of big events in our current history that are related to interesting ideas that social psychologists can study, okay? If you think about it, this pandemic is just, it's really interesting, okay? It's scary, but it's very interesting. It's changed the way we behave, right? It's changed the way we think in major ways, powerful ways, hasn't it? This has never happened in any of our lifetimes, right? The last time something this major occurred was way back in 1918, right? During the pandemic of the early 1900s. And many millions of people died in that. But of course, we weren't alive back then, so we don't know how people were influenced by all of the scary things that were going on, right, during that pandemic. And so this is all new to us. This is a modern world, right? How are we reacting to things? And you can see on social media, especially, I don't even like to look at Facebook anymore because there are just polar opposite views on there as to how to approach the pandemic in the first place, right? And I have family members and I have friends from childhood and I have other friends, former students and things like that on Facebook, and everyone has an opinion, right, on the way we react to and we approach this pandemic. And so it's an interesting social psychological event, right? What is this environment that we're in right now that's so different from last year at the same time, right? It's very interesting. Other events I can think of that are sort of, very powerful, not sort of, but they are very powerful, are the demonstrations, right, that have occurred due to some very bad events that concern African Americans, right, in this country. And that has erupted all over the world, right, by people who have been discriminated against, right, or have felt racism in their lives. And it caught fire, didn't it, during the past few months. And this is a very interesting kind of a social psychological event or series of events that we could study, right? And scientists study in an unbiased way, right? We don't bring in our own biases when we study people or behavior or thoughts or beliefs or anything like that. But you can see that these are powerful kinds of social situations that influence the way we think and behave, all right? So those are just two examples, and I'm sure you can think of others that have happened just this year that have really set a fire under people, right? Okay, so social psychology is really cool, and I'm going to enjoy teaching this class to you as we go through the semester, and we can bring up current kinds of information that we can think about in new kinds of ways using information from your textbook, okay? All right, what's next? We need to go to the quizzes link in Blackboard, take a quiz, quiz 1. All right, make sure you read that chapter 1, take good notes before you take the quiz. Don't forget, if there are any web links in the lecture, you want to read those, okay, and understand them, because those could be full of information for the quiz, okay? Don't forget. All right, after you complete quiz 1, I'm sorry. After you complete that quiz, wait for Sunday at 3:30. Excuse me, I need some water. And every week, every Sunday at 3:30, you'll find the new week information popping up. Okay, and those magically appear at 3:30 every Sunday. Don't forget, before I choke to death today, don't forget to get acquainted on discussion board in the Blackboard system this week as well. So go on there and introduce yourself, give a short bio, whatever, right? Talk about what you like and what you don't like. You might talk about current events, right? And other events that I haven't described in this lecture that would be interesting to study from a social psychological perspective. And then you could include career plans, right? And other ideas, all right? So post those and then reply to a couple classmates' posts so that we can get to know each other in this course, okay? All right, good to be here, to see you, right? You're influencing me, even though you're not here. I saw you today, and I want you to enjoy the week. And if you have any questions at all, email me or call me, okay? And I'll put that office phone on the syllabus for you right after class today. All right, thanks very much, and I'll see you next Sunday at 3:30 on a new lecture for Chapter 2. Okay, thank you.